early light, what so proudly we hailed at the twilight's last gleaming, whose broad stripes and bright stars through the perilous fight and the ramparts we watched were so gallantly streaming, and the rocket's red glare, the bombs bursting in air, gave proof through the night that our flag was still there. Oh, say does that star-spangled banner yet wave o'er the land of the free and the home of the brave?
very good morning to you on this October 23rd, 2025. This is World HD, live each weekday, 8 a.m. Eastern Time, streaming live on X, Rumble, and YouTube. Unless we have difficulties, but I think everything's good. I am getting canceled on YouTube. I think it's because of the some of the music we're running, so I have to watch some of that. But I don't think many people are watching us on YouTube anyway. All right, so the not yet anyway. We'll see. Maybe we'll do some advertising on there. I don't know. Thinking about some of that stuff. Okay, today's Equity Thursday, and a lot of stuff going on. And not necessarily a positive day. We want to look at the harmonic structures, and keep in mind the old residual one. Okay, the 6574 in the S&P, the 24 126 in the Nasdaq, and then these new harmonic structures. We have two new ones on the S&P and on the Dow. The Dow is clearly holding up stronger. We've been talking about this. There's a good chance that that the Dow might take the leadership role. Okay, there's multiple reasons for that. If we escalate toward more of a world war situation, money will probably move out of places that are closer in the line of fire. Okay, and where does it's probably not in the U.S. All right, that's more Europe. Okay, Europe needs the war. We keep seeing signs that Europe needs the war. Europe doesn't let up. Zelensky doesn't let up, and now we see this meeting that was supposed to take place with Putin is now called off. Okay, and we'll take a look at that here in a second. So if that's the case, then there's a good chance that money's going to move into the big safe stocks. Okay, and we're starting to see signs of that. The question are we going to get this big rally, or and we're going to check that today. Right, the S&P came back down into the breakout zone. The Dow did not. The Dow held up above. It's hanging out above its 1/8. And then we get crude oil, right? Crude oil is obviously having a reaction off of all this stuff with Putin and no meeting. Okay. Okay. So government shutdown day 23 is now we're at 23, I do believe. And so probably another week of this. I would say, end of October, 1st of November, this will get serious. President Trump is going to have this trip through Asia next week, and I have a funny feeling that they're going to leave this thing hanging until he gets back, and then they'll put this thing in action. Maybe because I think this thing goes from the 27th through the 29th. I'm pretty sure. So we'll have to get those dates straight because it's going to be important. Again, a lot of things coming together at the end of October, 1st of November, and I think this will be determinative as to how this year finishes up. We've been talking about these rate cuts on the Federal Reserve. 25 baked in for October, probably a chance of 50. Okay, again, we're going to get the rate announcement in October, then we're going to get the statement, and then we're going to get questions and comments from Jerome Powell. Pretty soon, we're going to get a new Fed chair. I'm sure that's in the works. I'm sure they're interviewing people. I thought it was going to be Kevin Warsh, but this recent interjection of Rick Reeder, who ran fixed income for BlackRock for a long time, then he got switched into some other position, kind of overseeing, I think it was asset allocation, if I'm not mistaken. And then now he is in the running for the Fed chair, which is kind of mind blowing, right? We saw that newswire hit last week on one of the shows. that that one I still haven't. I don't even know if I processed it. I didn't even think about talking about that until we were just saying this. So that would be a that's one out of right and left field as far as I'm concerned. Okay, so we're going to keep a close eye on that. We did do this tech roundtable last night, and Zero Woke Points is asking if they. Yeah, so a lot of a lot of background issues with that. They switched platforms to some Boxcast or something like that, and I think it's so that we can stream it in more locations. We had a lot of people interested in wanting to stream it live on their channel or on their, Rumble feed or whatever it is, and on X and so forth. So Courtney's husband worked on setting up a new platform. I didn't know they were doing this until I went to log in 15 minutes before the show and I couldn't get in. So it was a lot of chaos trying to actually get sound and get video and get everybody situated. And maybe part of it's because I know only what I need to know. I don't know all the little bells and whistles of all this equipment. So that could have been part of the problem. But then I heard them scrambling in terms of people calling in and saying, "Are you going to be able to stream this? Are you going to be?" So I don't know what happened. I don't. I mean, I know that we did do it. You can find it. Shannon Joy restreamed it. I know you can find it on her Rumble channel. Boy, I really have my issue with my throat this morning. The I know she streamed it, and Courtney Turner should show up under her X feed, and it should show up on probably under her Rumble as well. And in the future, like I'll probably stream it too, to this Rumble to World H to this Rumble page, and then also on X. It's just, I mean, I think there's four of us, and then there's Lynn, and he's running the whole thing behind the scenes, so it's a lot for him. And I know this was a big shift for him to try to restream to all these different platforms, and so, but it just gets caught. It's too bad because here's the thing with the whole show is that yesterday um, the let me give you a rundown on it. So I think that I thought there was some really good content in there. A lot of concern over this technocracy, and mostly on the negative side of things. There's also a positive side of this, but I think that being negative on this right now is warranted because all the stuff that's going on with the AI and the quantum computing and war and debt. I mean, we were riding an edge here for sure. And the question is, either if we get intentionally taken off a cliff or we go off a cliff, right, into a war situation or sovereign debt crisis or, you know, some kind of a false flag or some kind of an event, does, you know, the does the technocracy almost fall in place then? Okay, because it's all there. Or does that cause destruction to it? Remember, this thing technocracy started in that World One. I think it was pre World War One and World War Two. So this has been something in the making for a long, long time. And really, what that means is just science. The concept behind it is people that think they're really smart. Putting the pieces of the puzzle together to how the world economy is supposed to run, and then trying to make sense of that, right, using technology. And that's kind of my take on the whole thing. So on the surface, it doesn't seem so bad. The problem is that who's funding that whole thing? Who funds the scientists that put this thing together? We get these guys like this Curtis Yarvin or Yuval Noah Harari on both sides of the spectrum, and they both are these supposedly great thinkers, and they're kind of these people putting the pieces of the puzzle together and trying to make this whole thing work. And so then that trickles down to people like Peter Thiel and JD Vance, and then these guys have political influence and financial influence. And then where do they get their money? Is it government funded? Is it, again, I always find it funny that this PayPal mafia, everybody in that PayPal mafia is now spread out doing something different. Is it just because was there really that much of an aggregation of talent that came together at PayPal, and that these guys really got on the inside and they were all that motivated, and they've all now split off, and David Sachs and Peter Thiel, you can go down the list, right? There's so many of these people in there. Is it really a coincidence, or is there more going on here? So I think there's a lot more going on here. And so that's why I think the negativity when we talk about this technocracy, because we have to be skeptical. I think that's a thing. I think that's kind of the job of, really, I think media reporting and doing stuff like this is really about trying to be skeptical on things. The positive stuff hopefully takes care of it on its own. It's our job to I think be somewhat skeptical. Okay. All right. So the the nice thing was Aaron did a fantastic show on Monday night. And you don't have to watch the whole thing, but if you get a chance, go back and watch Aaron Arday. And he did a whole thing on this healthcare from a healthcare angle. And that's what we did last night, too. The good thing is there wasn't a lot of overlap. I thought there might be some overlap there, but there really wasn't. Aaron did a really good job of going through the history of healthcare. And it helps give you an angle on how negative, we think of Rockefeller, it's got a great name, but if you really watch what Aaron has to say and go through that, you realize that, they were using essentially oil byproducts to start the pharmaceutical industry. The same thing happened with our water when they put fluoride in our water, right? It was it was leftover stuff from aluminum production. Okay. So they're essentially dumping waste on the people, all right, and getting rid of waste and creating these other industries as byproducts of these monopolies that were created, like, in the oil space, and we're going to talk about that today with this whole situation with Russia because this folds right into that. But the the you know, it, I think it's worth watching what Aaron had to say Monday night, and then I think what we did last night was pretty good work. It was the only problem with this technocracy roundtable is that it's I'm going to try. We'll see what happens. I'm going to try to lay out this some me with software, but I'm going to try to put this software packet or this communication package together for us, so that we, as we're creating notes on this, we can kind of put them in order, and then that way we can move through this stuff, and everybody kind of knows where it's going. That way we can be because I feel like it's you know we kind of go wherever the interest is at, and there's good to that, but I think when you have four people and everybody has a lot of everybody has done a lot of thinking on this anyway, and Patrick Wood for 30 some years and Courtney Turner's done tons of work on this, and he's been working on this essentially for 20 years as well. I've been looking at it from a different perspective, so I'm kind of new to the technocracy thing, but I think I just called it something different. I knew something was up. I just didn't know what to call it. And so now it's getting a lot easier to categorize this stuff. So when you're doing that, it's nice to get this. I think it's more important. I think it's important for us to have a little bit better flow through that stuff. Okay, so with that being said, Aaron's going to have a show tonight with Mike Adams, also known as the Health Ranger. He has his own platform called what's it called? Hmm, I forget. You can find it. I forget the name of his platform. He has his own media platform. It'll come to me. Anyway, he also has created his own AI called Enoch, and that's what they're going to be going over tonight is Enoch, and then the evolution of it. So I think it's going to be good because we're going to get a chance to see and he's been talking about this a lot. Won't be his first time out. He's probably done, I don't know, 50 shows on this potentially at this point. The thing is though, Aaron's going to direct this more it'll be interesting to see where this thing gets directed with the two of them. It'll clearly be around the health side because that's what Enoch was essentially built around, was the health component. But the other interesting thing about this will be seeing how we can ask the questions of how this thing was built. I think Mike has put a couple $1 million into this thing, so it's small compared to the big boys, right? The Anthropics and the OpenAIs and the XAI and all these different big platforms that are spending billions and billions of dollars. So we can't really compare it to that. But what we can do is say what's nice about this thing is you can see how it's constructed, a lot more where the data is coming from that feeds the thing, and how it's giving how the command prompts are written, and then the feedback that we're getting. So I think we get an inside look at it, and that's what's interesting about this. Not only that, I don't think they've done much with it on the financial side. So I would like to get involved and see if we can't influence where some of the financial component comes from, because then there's an AI tool that we have. We know what it's been fed with. We know the information. And because right now these AI platforms like ChatGPT it's pretty impressive, really. And so are the other ones, and they all have their little intricacies, but they're all pretty impressive. The key is, though, where do they go in the future? If they kind of go off the path, or they start restricting use, or it becomes, or you just get the light package, you get ChatGPT Lite, and then, the certain people get the elite package, right? And even if you paid that much, you might not be able to get access to it. So I think the real important thing here is they're using our data to feed these things, but we may end up not getting access to it. Okay, it might just go to a few people. So that's why this Enoch's important, because again, it's kind of an AI for the people, right? No, there's no fee, there's no charging, there's no advertising. He just did this on his own, right? Because I think if his concern too, he might call it something different than technocracy, but again, he has these concerns of globalists, obviously what happened with COVID, because in the health side of things, that's kind of his area. So I think he had great concerns around that. And those are the kind of things that drove him to do this. So I think it's going to be fascinating, right? I'm very interested to watch this for many, 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 many reasons. All right, so check that one out tonight. And all right, here we go. So let's take a look at this. The other nice thing about Enoch is you can download it to your computer, and you don't need the internet. So once you download this stuff, somehow it stores these files in a very compact format. I forget what it's called, but it stores all the data in a very compact format. So you could not have internet access and still go in there and look up things on health. You could still do research like, and he's feeding it with a lot of stuff. So this all things to learn. We're learning from this. I think on the fly, but I think it's great. Okay, let me see here. We want to jump in and actually the economic data. Let's just go to this. I think we is that what we want? No, this one. Yeah, this one. Okay, let's do that. And I'm just going to go through this today. I didn't get a chance to. Um, Actually, I do have the big overview. Let's go to that. Let's do that. Yeah, I think we're good. Let me go in here and do this. Okay. And this is funny. This thing's working again. Today I plug it in and it works. Who knows? Um, there we go. Okay. I think it's working. Okay. All of it's working again. Does works and it doesn't work, then it works again. No idea. Nothing's changed. No, as far as I can tell, nothing's changed. Okay. Let's see here. Let me get this stuff off here. Okay. All right. So this week, where are we? Wednesday. Okay, so UK CPI. Again, we're watching the CPI. We're supposed to get our CPI data on Friday, so we'll get UK CPI. That's probably out. Let's see if that came out. I'm not seeing it. I'm not seeing it. Okay. And then the ECB President Lagarde speaks today. A couple times she's been speaking. I want to go back and do some, like I said, just been busy this week, but I want to go back and look at these IMF meetings that went on last week. She was there. Kristalina Georgieva was there, who runs the IMF. I think there was a World Bank Bonjay. I think that's his name. I think he was there. There were a lot of these global elites are there. Okay, and it's interesting to get their take on stuff and just see kind of where they're at. Okay, I think President Trump stirred a lot of things up in a lot of good ways, and these people are scrambling. And um, again, who's funding the IMF, the World Bank, and so forth. And then we see all the stuff that's going on in France. And I think Christine Lagarde will be interesting to watch over the next few months because we're seeing pressures on the euro, okay, on this eurozone. And we can see this, again, everywhere I look, people just keep trashing the dollar. We just hit 38 trillion in debt, okay? And so what do they say? This is why stocks are going up because there's so many dollars out there, there's so much debt, and the only place people can go is gold and stocks, right? And there's some truth to that, okay? I get the story. We'll break that down here in a minute. But the the real issue here is with Christine Lagarde. I just don't buy that whole story because I just don't see that with the dollar. I see them. I've watched this for 25 years. I've watched them try to suppress, this dollar, and try to pump this euro up, and it's mind-boggling to me. It's kind of like, the only thing I can come up with to relate it to this is 9/11. You see 9/11 and then you think about it and you're like something when you find out things just don't fit there, all the different components of that day and you start going back and look, you're like it just doesn't add up. And so this thing's a lot like that where you watch over and over and over again where they come out and the ECB will announce rates. Again, this goes back to John Claude Trichet, Mario Draghi, and then Christine Lagarde. So this has been going on for, 8, 16, 22 years, 20 to 25 years. And you just can't believe something can be suppressed that long, right? Just like 9/11. I mean, a lot of people still think, you know, they still think that it was, they still believe the narrative, and and it's the same thing with this euro and the eurozone. Okay. I don't know what it is, but somehow they're able to suppress this with the narrative. Okay. And it just concerns me because how much control do they have over them, over what is said and what's done and what is said? Because it just doesn't add up, right? This euro's really poorly constructed. You know, Europe's weak. And yet and look, I get it. The US has a ton of debt, right? 38 trillion, right? I mean, but when you compare it to who else drives the world economy, really? I mean, we drive a lot of the world economy, and it's the U.S. consumption engine that drives a lot of that economy. And that's why President Trump's able to put these tariffs on, okay, and use these tariffs to our advantage. Now, that might be weakening. We might be seeing that kind of falling apart now, right? That thing may have come to the end of its rope, all right? And, but nonetheless, you can see the amount of power that it gives him to negotiate on our behalf, hopefully, right? Hopefully that's what's going on. Okay. So that's kind of the economic data for this week. We get the CPI on Friday, right? We get a few housing, we get a few things on housing, and yeah, Christine Lagarde. Let me just check this real fast and see if the UK stuff did come out. I just can't believe that just kind of disappeared. Um, yeah, that's weird. Okay, all right. Anyway, that's that. The Canada retail sales, is that out today? Let me see if that one's out. I want to watch that one. Yeah, that one's going to, so that one's out in like 7 minutes. So maybe we'll pay a little bit of attention to that. We haven't really been watching the economic data come out at 8:30 just because we haven't had it. And then 10 o'clock today, we get existing home sales, and then consumer confidence out of Europe. So there's a few things starting to pick up. If the CPI starts to come out again, we're also going to get CPI out of Japan this week. So there's a few, again, the inflation's going to matter, right? This goes back to, is the Federal Reserve going to do 25 or 50 in December? If they do 50, they're more than likely going to do another 50 early in 2026. And we've been hinting around at that for the last week or so, that this is a possibility. What would that do to the stock market? Okay, I don't think it's going to make it do nothing. I think it's either going to make this big push up into the end of the year, or it's going to start to break down. And that's what we've been watching, right? We've been watching this. Do we get a second wave in an Elliott wave pattern? And again, I don't want to make more out of Elliott wave than what it is, but we do tend to see markets move in these three wave patterns, 3 waves, 5 waves. It's just kind of how nature works. And but we can't get that second wave down in stock. So that's the key. We're trying to take in this information, the CPI, what's going on on the war front, what's going on, in South America, what's going on in Ukraine and Russia, what's going on in China, what's going on in Asia at this point. Lots of things moving. There's always things moving. I just think there's an excessive amount of parts and pieces moving right now. And so what's going to happen at the end of the year with stocks? I think it's either going to be this big whoosh up, or potentially a start to break down. And that's why we're watching to see this. When we get these pushed down, like this wave one push down, then we get this consolidation. Are we going to get a second wave and a push down? And that's why we can use these harmonics. All right. So that kind of gets us through the economic data for the day. All right, let's keep rolling here. I want to go through some of these headlines. Let's get through some of this stuff. Okay, government shutdown. We talked about that. Meeting with Putin is canceled. And so this opens up a big can of worms here with the U.S. is not only is the meeting canceled, but now we're going to hit Russia with sanctions on oil. Okay, as the frustrations mount with President Trump. Let me go ahead and run this clip here, and then we'll start talking about this stuff.
When we canceled the meeting with President Putin, it didn't feel right to me. It didn't feel like we were going to get to the place we have to get, so I canceled it. But we'll do it in the future. But next week we'll be with many of you in those locations that I told you. Then it's back to Washington. So.
Okay, so that was him in the Oval Office with Mark Rutte, okay, the head of NATO. Is that a coincidence or not? Okay, and then we see that he's talking about what we're going to get into is the sanctions on Russia. Okay, this is a significant step by President Trump, and the reason is that since taking office, he really hasn't ramped up sanctions. He's talked about them. He knows that they're available to him, but he's always said, look, sanctions are expensive. They're not easy to implement. And he's right. Okay. It's hard to implement them. It's hard to police them. Okay. And most of the time they go nowhere. Okay. It's just this fake red line that they put out there that really means nothing. Okay. It really doesn't. It's a lot of bark usually, but there's not much bite in them. And we've seen this. Okay. Here's a couple moving parts. We were supposed to, President Trump was, there talks of him meeting with Indra Modi of India in Asia, right, at these ASEAN meetings that are coming up next week. Part of this trip that President Trump's going to take through the Asian rim. And Indra Modi backed out. Okay, now, part of this whole situation is, we've been covering this, and this is a big issue that India and China receive a lot of Russian oil. And India came out and said, like a week or so ago, yeah, we're going to stop. Sometime, maybe it was this week, end of last week, early this week. Yeah, okay, we're going to agree with the U.S. We're going to do we're going to live up to their request that we stop taking in Russian oil. Okay, so that's what they say in the headlines. But that's not what they were going to do at all. Okay, that's what they tell us. But they're not going to stop taking this oil. Where there's a will, there's a way, and they're going to get around that whole thing. They've been getting around it forever. So this is why President Trump has said it's very hard to one implement them and then police them and enforce them and actually have them have some bite. Okay, now they have done some pretty down and dirty things. They seize the Russian assets, take the interest off of that, and then they use that to feed money back into Ukraine. Okay, you could call that innovative. A lot of people would say that's pretty innovative, And we watched as that whole thing went down, last year, while Janet Yellen, right about the time, must have been like early November. It was right when the transition was taking place, right when we found out President Trump had won. And they were trying to jam this thing through, this great idea that they'd had, they seize all Russian assets in the G7, take the interest of that, and then feed the interest on it into Ukraine. Now, some global rule says that they're not allowed to actually take Russian assets and use it to feed Ukraine, okay, with this war effort. But they can take the interest on it and feed Ukraine, okay? So they did that. And then they talk about these sanctions, but nothing ever happened. So President Trump's been pretty reluctant to implement these sanctions because he knows that it's expensive and it's a hassle, and it's probably going to cause more problems than what it's worth. But that's where we've gotten to, okay? That's how this stuff is broken down, okay? And so he sort of let it play out until now, and that's changed. Now we have these two big players in Russia, Rosneft and Lukoil. Okay, these are the crown jewels of the Russian energy economy. We have this guy Igor Sechin, who's a loyalist of Putin's. Okay, and he runs Rosneft. Rosneft controls by itself 40% of Russian oil production. Okay, so not only that, right? If that isn't enough, we're seeing the coordination with the EU. Okay, the EU is out with another sanction package, kind of like we were just talking about, right? Some kind of a sanction deal where they're going to, who knows what they're up to. I haven't seen details on it yet, but and we can't the the so sanctions on Russia. Europe is now in on this whole thing. Okay, they're going to come out with another sanction package. We'll have to see what that is. And President Trump is sitting in the Oval Office with Mark Rutte of NATO. To me, that's like three big billboards. You're driving down the highway and you see one billboard. That's okay. You might catch it. You might be like, oh, okay, I see that whatever they're advertising or promoting. When you see three billboards in a row like that, it's hard to miss. You're like, wow, there's one, there's another one, there's another one, right? It's kind of what we're seeing here, that this thing is not progressing well and that this is looking more and more and more toward war, okay? Mark Rutte, and India's backing away and putting heavy sanctions. Putin's not backing down. Why is Putin not backing down? Again, the influence, we can only imagine, right? And we can only guess as to what it is. But I think a lot of it is the fact that these guys like this Igor Sechin and these oligarchs, they're going to keep pushing. Because remember, there's all these proxy wars all over the place, right? They've got interest all over. Okay, and that's what they're really trying to, they're trying to defend their interests, okay? And at what cost, all right? And so we're starting to see this have an impact on markets. And that's what we always watch for, okay? When you see a headline come out and it sounds like a big headline, but then the market doesn't really move, you're like, I don't know if I buy that. If you see a headline come out and it moves a market, you're like, okay, something's going on there. And then what's even better is when we have these harmonic levels and we can see like, okay, it broke key levels, right? And especially when it's levels that I don't think the market is aware of or is looking at. That's when they're even more important to us. And this goes back to what we've been doing with this crude oil market for a long time, all the way back in late 2023 with the whole stand down of Israel with Hamas. Okay. And that 79.37 and the 63.18. So we'll take a look at the crude oil markets too. Okay, so if these sanctions work, okay, that President Trump's going to implement, here's what it's going to come down to, is whether or not India and China are going to be able to continue to buy Russian oil, right? Is there a way to shut that down? Okay. And again, like I said before, where there's a will, there's a way. Okay. Even though India says it will stop buying Russian oil, we can assume they already have a workaround in mind. Okay. Because it's too much money for them. All right. It's just too much. And so they're not going to stop doing that unless they're absolutely forced to do it. Okay, no matter how much you try to sanction them. So again, Modi was supposed to meet with President Trump at this ASEAN summit. He said he's not going to do the meeting. This all happened yesterday, okay, late in the day. And he can't be, he says he can't be there because India is still celebrating Diwali, okay, which is their festival of lights. All right. This is kind of a big deal. This is probably, you can still make your appearance at Diwali, at the Festival of Lights, and you can still get to this ASEAN meeting. So that's a bad excuse, right? That's like when you have a friend who says, yeah, I can't do this, and they give you a reason. You could say, hey, man, you can just tell me why you can't do it. No big deal, right? I mean, that's essentially what's going on here is he just came up with a pretty bad excuse, okay? So this is not good. As we talked about, this would have been good to put. This would have been good. This meeting with Modi would have been good to put pressure back on China. Okay, if President Trump could have intercepted him at this ASEAN meeting before he met with China and gotten some sort of an agreement, this would have been really good and put more pressure back on China. This whole thing is starting to really, there's a domino effect here. Okay, Russia thing falls apart, Modi backs away. Now President Trump has lost momentum as he goes into this Asian conference. How's he going to regain that momentum? Because, and what are they even going there for at this point, right? The real thing would have been to have this meeting with Modi and get something locked down with him and put pressure back on China and potentially even on Russia. So this is, I don't know, we'll see. Again, the crude oil market's moving, so that tells me that my thesis may not be that far off. Okay. On top of this, we see the U.S. is considering curbing China's purchase of U.S. software, okay, critical software. Let me see if I actually have, let me go through some of these. Yep, heavy sanctions on Russia coming, okay. India's Modi to skip the ASEAN summit, and then the U.S. to curb this China software. I think I may have something. Let me see if I've got this on it. Let's take a look at this. All right. I don't know how detailed this is, but no, that's the wrong one. It must be, maybe I don't have that one on here. Okay, I must not have something on it. But that's essentially the headline is what's going to happen with this. Now, this also, because it's equity day, not only is it impacting crude oil, but there's this overhang on the stocks, all right? And that's what we want to look at is what's the impact on the crude, what's the impact on the stocks, what's the impact on the treasury market. Gold's in a world of its own right now. Okay, I think gold is in this converging triangle. Right, it's had this big run up. Why did it have this big run up? There's a lot you can speculate. As there are lots of reasons why. There's not enough silver in London. There's this, that, all these different things, and some of it's probably right. It's probably a combination of many, many things. But I think gold is kind of in a world of its own. It's already made its move. Now it's got to sort of digest that move. Okay, so I don't know if we can look to gold for much information, but we can look to crude oil because it's been pretty quiet, drifting lower. We talked about this yesterday. It's a pretty good spot. If someone's doing that bear put spread or they have some short interest in crude oil, maybe it's a chance to lighten load because I think the thing got down into like 56 area. That's pretty far. Like I think they want it around like 58 to 62, right? That's kind of where they want this thing, right? Keep it below the 63.18, although they probably don't know that level. But somewhere below that 63.18, like 62 to 58 would kind of be this happy zone where the Saudis aren't totally ticked off, but it continues to put pressure on Russia, right? It's continued back pressure on Russia. But when it gets to 56, that's getting a little bit low. Okay, so again, we see this rally back. So let's go ahead and take a look at that stuff. Let's take a look at a couple charts here. Okay, so here's the crude oil market, and this is our harmonic structure, right? This white dashed line. And, as long as it stays below 63.18, right, the pressure is still onto the downside. But you can see this is where we were yesterday, today's what, the 23rd, so 22nd, so early in the day. So we were probably looking at something around in here yesterday. This was yesterday when we were doing the show, somewhere down in there. Okay, and we had an energy build, right? You can see this, always want to be cautious with those. And again, at some point we do these, when I do this, we'll cover how you build that so people can have this energy build for themselves as well, so they can program it in whatever platform they use. But this is a pretty big rally. So what is that, 57 to 58? With a low of 56.22. So I think the crude oil and the futures market, what is this, December's futures market, got down to like 56. I think basically it cracked 56. It was 55.97. That's pretty low, right? That's pretty low for crude oil. So not surprised to see this thing come back, especially with all the stuff that happens, right? That's happening right now. Okay. But the key is, can it stay below 63.18? We have this longer term perspective, right? As long as it stays, as long as it continues to ride that purple line down, this one, okay? As long as it can continue to ride that thing or something like it, it could even climb above it and kind of ride it from above, sit above it, but just keep kind of following that trend line down. That's kind of a decent line in the sand. Now, at some point, it's going to get down to these levels where it's just not tolerable for the global community. And that's going to change, right? We'll see things come in and support this market, right? It's going to probably find this 58 to 62, 55 to 63, that kind of a range. That's what we're looking for. Okay, let's go take a look at, I wanted to jump over and look next at, let's see. Oh, you know what? We had one more clip I wanted to run here. This is before we get too far, one more clip here with Scott Bessent talking about this stuff, right? Talking about the sanctions on Russia. Remember, he's the one that's setting up trade talks with the U.S. set for Friday. And so they're going to lead this off. I think they're going to have trade negotiations before, and then next week President Trump comes with some kind of advancement, right, in these trade talks. That's what I think what they're trying to push for, some advancement next week on this Asian trip. So here's Scott Bessent talking about Russia and applying these sanctions and how stiff they're intending to be with this.
As you know, and the world can see, President Trump is the president of peace. He's done peace deals, trade deals, tax deals, and part of the peace deal, the real remaining final conflict in the world, this would be the 9th one that he has found a solution to, would be between Russia and Ukraine. President Putin has not come to the table in an honest and forthright manner, as we'd hoped. There were talks in Alaska. President Trump walked away when he realized that things were not moving forward. There have been behind-the-scenes talk, but I believe that the president is disappointed at the where we are in these talks. So either this evening or first thing tomorrow morning, we are going to be announcing a substantial increase in Russia's sanctions. I'm not going to give you the exact sanctions, but I can tell you that this will be one of the largest sanctions that we have done against the Russian Federation.
Okay, so there we have it. So just checking out the chat this morning. Good morning, Trumpet, Zero Woke. We talked a little bit about that on the round table. It is out there. I apologize that it wasn't the link that I think some confusion with that. Okay, Gordon, good morning. Watching on Shannon Joy. Oh, good. I'm glad you liked it, Gordon. Great. TZ Burton, good morning. Caught the end of the round table. Usually watch it later. TZ, Windows 11 is forcing you to accept Microsoft AI. I think that's true. I've been noticing the same thing with Microsoft. Not only that, they want all your stuff to go on the cloud. It's very difficult to keep things on your own hard drive. You have to be deliberate. Like, you have to want that to happen, because if you don't, they're going to take you down the path of putting everything on their cloud. Which, what does that mean? It means they get your data, your information, feed their large language models with it, feed their AI, and they're going to charge you for it, right? At some point, it's going to get so big that now you're going to have to expand your cloud, the basic cloud they give you, because you're going to have too much junk on there, and you're going to be paying. So it's a double whammy, right? They're stealing all your stuff to feed their system, and you're going to pay for it, right? So I agree with that. Good morning, Rachel. You made it. Glad to see you in here. Glad you made it. Geo Rich. Good morning, Filippo. We got to turn the volume up a little bit on his mic. We got to turn the volume up. He's coming in much lower than people on other channels. Can hardly hear him on my headphones at the gym. Okay, sorry. I think that's for me to turn my volume up. I'm not sure. It looks like it's coming through okay. Maybe I can turn it up just a little bit. Let me see if that helps. There we go. Turn it up. That looks like it's taking it up a little bit more. Maybe that was on Bessent. I don't know. Okay. Let's see. Zero Woke. Filippo agreed. Volume. Okay, volume is a little lower. All right. Let me let me know if that gets a little bit better there. I'll jack it up. Okay. Okay, everybody's saying that. All right, good morning. It was under Courtney's channel, but you had to scroll way down to find it. Okay, All right, great. Okay, so we're up to date on that stuff. All right, let's keep rolling with these charts here. I want to take a look at, let's go look at this, the S&P. I want to look at the S&P 500. Remember, that's our big broad measure. So let's take a look at this, where things stand. Okay, and again, I'm going to measure it against this, two things. First thing is this, the residual harmonic, okay, that we've seen work a couple times now. Back here on that Friday when President Trump released that, again, tomorrow's going to be another Friday, so be prepared, okay? Russian sanctions could have an impact. This happened at the end of 2024, and I see these patterns happen, right? Are they, how many of these are synthetic? How many of these are natural? Okay, I always ask that question. There's a lot of things that happen in markets. It's pretty amazing. Symmetric moves. You'll see like a bar or a wave, and you'll take that wave from high to low and you transfer it to another one, and it's almost identical. And you transfer it to another one, it's almost identical. I did a 3-hour show with Ryan Matta way back. It would have been probably like May of 2024. And we did it on Bitcoin, and we went through and we just kept breaking it down into different time frames and looking at the symmetry in in these waves and in these patterns. And you can probably find it. I think he broadcast it everywhere, but it was a pretty good instructional because we really tore it apart. So if you have interest in these symmetric moves, decent place to go look, right? I mean, I think it was almost all educational. There was no intent in terms of like predicting anything with Bitcoin or anything like that. We were just breaking it down as to how you can use it to predict markets. Okay. Anyway, the point is, we had this Friday, be 3 Fridays ago tomorrow, not last Friday, but the Friday before. We see that information get released at 10:57. Okay, the market gets hammered Friday, gaps back up. It start the next week. Then last Friday, we see it get hammered, right? And the key is, to me, right, that's one thing all by itself. But when it gets smacked down right into this harmonic level, okay, the 65.74, to me, that means that totally changes the game, okay? It's not just getting smacked down into, space, right? That means nothing. It's getting smacked back down into the 65.74, okay, twice, right? And we saw that this thing did have impact, right, on the way up, right? We go way back here, again, this thing starts to fade again as we change contracts, but we can see on the way up, it stopped there, it didn't quite get there on that one, okay? But this 65.74, that was our target for a long, long time. And it did have a little bit of resistance on the way up, not a lot. Spent a lot of time up above with the idea that it probably would come back at some point and test that 65.74. And it did. And the way that it did it is what matters, right? Friday, bam. Next Friday, bam. Okay. What's going to happen tomorrow? Are we going to see something else? Okay. Some kind of symmetry, something go on tomorrow. Okay. And again, back to this, is there a chance, okay, that this thing, is that showing up on there? I guess it didn't switch. That's crazy. Oh, I know why. Here we go. That's where I want to put it. Okay, there's that Elliott wave pattern. So we've seen lots of these ones, the push down to one, push down to one, push down to one, then the consolidation, and then pushes higher. Are we going to get a push down and then a consolidation and then a push down through that 65.74? So what I'm saying is there's a good chance that 65.74, okay, that white dashed line is where that number one is on the Elliott wave thing below me. So the number one could be 65.74. So if we break below 65.74, that starts to tell us that we're going from point 2, we're in the midst of taking back the distance from point 1 to point 2. And we could be going from point 2 to point 3, okay? And if we go from point 2 to point 3, it could be a pretty significant move because a lot of times when these tops take a while to form, they can break down pretty quickly, and you can actually gap down through that level. So could something happen as we go into Friday or over the weekend where we get this big gap down? Could something happen? There's a lot of stuff going on. Could something happen, okay? 2 Fridays ago, last Friday, this Friday, okay? Just saying, right? Something for us to watch. And this is what I'm saying. Like, I think we're either going way higher because of these interest rate cuts, 50 basis points, or we're potentially going way lower. I just don't think we're going to limp into the end of this year, right? There's too many things going on to just kind of limp our way into the finish line for 2025. Okay, let's take a look at this. Let's go look at the, here, we want to look at this harmonic structure. So this is the new harmonic structure. Okay, we have this weekly, right? And you can see right back here where this big yellow circle's at in the pink shaded zone, that's where we got this signal, okay? And we just break right out. Very little breaks above, comes back and retests it right there, and then it's off to the races. And then I've marked all these yellow dots where it kind of got stuck up here between the 2/8 and the 3/8, back and forth, back and forth, back and forth. Can't break up to the halfway. Starts to break down again. You can see it working its way through here. Again, mark these yellow spots. And I would even mark this one right here because it's the center of the breakout zone. And that has its own unique little characteristic. So let's go ahead and mark that one too. But you can see these yellow reactions to it. Okay. And now we're flirting with this pink shaded zone again. So if we're looking at 65.74, okay, and I haven't projected what this thing would do to the downside. What would be, do I have that? Let me see if I actually have that. That would be kind of interesting. So let me just put that on here. So we've got, okay, so 65. So if we go to the downside 5/8, let's just go ahead and mark that on here. Let me do that while we're on here. Let's do, okay, so the downside halfway on this thing would be 65.93. 65.93. Okay, so I think that's about it right there. All right, that would be the downside halfway. Does that make sense? Let's just look and see if that looks right. Yeah, that looks about right. Let me just squish this together a little bit. Yeah, that looks about right. Okay, and then the full downside would be, it would be at 64.95. So let's go ahead and mark that, 64.95. Okay, that's about it right there. Okay. There we go. And so 65.74, let's put that on here too. 65.74. So that's the old level. All right. Let me just change that. Okay. So this downside halfway, right, has some potential characteristics to it. We get to the downside halfway. If we make this move down, if this S&P starts to break down, 65.74 is that 0.1, okay? We also have that halfway downside there. Now, we spent a lot of time above this thing, okay? And so you can say, what's going on? Good question. I don't know what's going on. I'd rather have seen this thing get to the upside halfway, right? The dark green line and hesitate there. Now, when we look at the Dow, you'll see that it did, okay? It actually got to the upside 5/8. This goes back to the Dow leading the S&P. Large cap stock, better balance sheet. If something bad's going to happen and people need to be in equities, they're going to move out of this stuff and move to the large cap stuff, the Dow, okay? That's why we're watching that. So that's that. So again, 65.74 and this dark green line here at 65.93. Okay, so basically that 65.74, 65.93, about a 15-point range, should prove important if this market goes down there. All right, let's take a look at this Dow. Okay, so the Dow got up here. Okay, so it went up here to the 5/8. Again, same thing, right? We get the signal right back in here where this pink shaded zone begins. Okay, market breaks right out, goes straight up. You can see I've marked the reactions in here on yellow. They're not quite as, it's definitely more movement. You can see more of a thrust to the upside, okay? And relative to its harmonic structure, it blasts right through the halfway. S&P didn't get there. It only got to its 3/8. This thing went to its 5/8, okay? And it stopped. And then we talked about this. There was a little bit of divergence up there. And I said, the other day I was saying the odds of this thing coming back into that pink breakout zone is quite high because it's just not the right way to do it. Usually this thing should build some energy around that pink shaded zone and then break out, okay? Like we've seen with crude oil, like we've seen with so many other markets, right? Silver, I'm trying to think, all the markets we've watched, okay? Typically you want to see it build some energy, right? Before it just breaks out and goes like this. That can lead to failed signals, all right, or reversals, right? I don't know if failed signals I don't know how to categorize it. Just, it's a troubled market, right? Something's not right with this market, right? It's troubled. And I think that's what's going on. Are these markets troubled? So if this Dow breaks down below that pink shaded zone, if someone wants to be long, then I would say the Dow's the place to be. Okay, large cap stuff. If someone wants to be short, I would move to other things, right? Like the S&P. Now, let's take a look at other markets here. Let's see what's going on with the NASDAQ. Okay, because again, we don't have a harmonic structure in this, so we're only looking at the residual. So it looks like it's kind of hanging in there. Again, earnings haven't been great. We see issues with Tesla. We see issues with some of those big, some of the earnings this week haven't been great. The big tech stuff comes out next week and it starts to roll. So this was kind of a precursor this week with Tesla, with IBM, with a few of these others. Okay. The big stuff's coming though. Okay. But so far, and that's another thing that comes at the end of next week, right? That's another one of those things that comes at the end of next week. Okay. So again, 24,165 would be the level in here. Okay, that's what we're watching for. We don't have anything else at this point, right? But it's sort of just kind of going sideways and may have actually had divergence right here. There's a decent chance that we just saw a decent amount of divergence here. I would say we probably did. I think that's a divergent level. Okay, we get, and one way to look at this is a similar, same high in price. Okay, but the indicator is going down here. Okay, so we're seeing, essentially a trend down in these indicators. Okay, you can see them trending down, right? Lower highs down here, higher highs or similar highs up above. Okay, so again, we're starting to get divergence. There's a lot of ways to look at it. You can look at it again. What are we looking at? The price, take the derivative, slope, take the derivative, rate of change. Okay, that's what we're trying to do here. First and second derivative of the actual price movement. Okay, let's take a look at this Russell, see what's going on there. Okay, so it's still hanging out above. This is a good sign in terms of the U.S., right? Small cap, mid cap, hanging out above all these prior highs. So again, the ceiling is potentially becoming the floor. Does this thing could it retest? I mean, look, the Russell looks pretty good. And we saw this scare last week with the Western Alliance and Zions Bank, right? This regional index and the banking. We saw those things, come out and create fear. Again, Jamie Dimon calling it cockroaches, where there's a couple cockroaches, there's more. And so he started to hint at that. Does that end up playing out? Does he know something we don't know? Are we going to get more of these regional bank failures? Are they trying to create these regional bank failures? This goes back to the technocracy. At some point, I'm going to put this on the table for us to go and do something on the banking side from a technocracy point of view, because crypto, digital currency, and banking, right? I think I'm gonna make note of that. I'm gonna propose that to the group because one, that's something Aaron knows a ton about, but I also would love to cover the banking side of this, of how they would, I did a bunch of work on this technocracy roundtable, and you don't always know what you're going to use, so you kind of do more work than what you need to because you don't know where we're going to go. Because again, sometimes there's not a really good plan, so you just do a lot of work, and and then you're like ready. And I don't mind doing it at this point, but it does take a lot of time. So the key is, can we figure out how to cover this banking thing? What would happen, right? What's the evolution that we would expect in year one if this technocracy thing? And that's how I laid it out. What would we expect up front? What would we expect in year two? What would we expect to see happening in year three if we're going to see this healthcare, AI, technocracy takeover? Okay, what would we expect to see? So that's kind of how I laid it out. I'd like to do the exact same thing for the banking sector because, again, they would love to grab these small regional banks and group them up into a couple large banks because it's a lot easier for them to control. All right. And I think we're going to see some of this stuff happening in the near future. They're setting up a bank in Ohio. I forget that Erebor, I think it is, or something. Again, it's one of Peter Thiel's, creations from, wherever he gets his names from. I think it's, I forget anyway. But and it's a replacement for the sovereign, for Silicon Valley Bank, right? I think they're kind of setting it up as sort of a replacement for that, right? To move money through, aggregate money, push it through for things that seem to be going on in Ohio. So we'll have to watch that. Ramaswamy, okay, he's governor of Ohio. This bank being set up by Peter Thiel, J.D. Vance's connections to Ohio, Anduril, Palmer Luckey's connections to Ohio, and all these drone manufacturing and so forth. So we'll have to keep an eye on that. Anyway, back to this Russell. It's holding up nicely, even with all the scares that occurred in the regional banking and sector, right? But it's holding up nicely. Okay, what else did we want to hit? Let's take a quick look at this. I think I wanted to look at, we've got the DAX here. Let's look at this on a little bit shorter term and just see if we're seeing anything break down here. Let's go to this one. Might take a second to fill in. The trend is up on this DAX. As the chart before, you can see this thing's gone crazy. Let's see if we can get something a little bit better here. I want to kind of look at this, see what's going on internally here with this thing. Okay, so we see a top up in here. I don't see anything major, but I need to do some more work on this. But we want to watch this. I want to watch the DAX. I want to watch the Nikkei. Let's take a look at that. Here's the Nikkei. Okay, I mean, just here was a prior high from 1989 back in here. And this thing spent some time. You can see it struggled up in this area. Okay, this was back last year when the carry trade blew up, happened in August, I think it was, August, September of 2024. This big sell-off, right, that goes from that yellow circle down to that one. And then this massive just shoot up, right, that went from 30,000 in the Nikkei up to 50,000. So it's huge. I mean, you're talking about an economy that's totally struggling, right? And here's my point with all this is that, back to this dollar and back to, let's take a look at that. We've got to look at this. I want to look at the debt clock because let's go take a peek at this. I think that's this one. There we go. So you can see up in the upper left-hand corner, the debt clock, we just cracked 38 trillion, okay? And so a lot of people are saying that the stocks are going to go higher because there's too many dollars out there. The dollar's devaluing, and the only place that you can put your money is either in gold or in equities, okay, in stocks going up. But I don't believe that because how can that happen in Japan as well, right? How can you can't have it all. You can't say, well, the yen is going, down or up and the dollar is going, they want to say the dollar is going down. And the reason is because, there's so much, all the printing of money, and it's not wrong. It's not a wrong concept. It's just, that's not what's happening. I don't think that's what's happening, right? You can say that all day long and you can trash the dollar all you want. But I think it's basing down in here. And if this thing starts to take off, I think the people in the know that it can go higher because I hear that on occasion. Like people who are thinking it through know the dollar can go higher. But what they're telling all of us is that's not the case. And I don't understand why. I really don't, because a dollar higher is good for U.S. citizens. So I don't understand what they're up to. Again, back to why they continually suppress the dollar and pump this euro has always been in question. For 25 years, I've watched this go on. But that's the key. We've hit the 38 trillion in debt. Okay. I don't know what it'd take us 2-3 months. I mean, we're adding $1 trillion, so we're going to add 3 to 4 trillion at this rate in a year. Okay. That's about what we're adding at this point in time. Okay. All right. So back to these charts. Let's look at that. What else did I want to hear here? Oh, let's look at the dollar while we're at it. Okay, see the progress on this. So again, we had this little chart right here, and we were watching this. Can it clear that purple shaded zone? Okay, and it did. Took a little bit deeper pullback than I would have wanted. We talked about this yesterday, I think. This guy right down in here, that spiked down. It went down to like 90, basically cracked 98. Quickly back up above this, this purple shaded zone. And now what we're looking at is this, okay? We can kind of put that behind us. We've got this green line here that we're watching, okay? It's a moving average. See if it holds. It came back, retested that green line. So again, morphing time frames together, right? That prior one took a deeper pullback than we wanted on the 4-hour chart. This one, it looked really good. Came right back into the green moving average. You can see coming down and starting to flatten out there. Okay, we've got an energy build here, right, by the blue box. And now what we're wanting to see is, can this thing make a move to this purple line at 100 on the index? All right. That's what we're watching to see. This is a big deal. The dollar moving higher would be a big deal for global markets. All right, let's take a look at this British pound as well. This is one that we have a couple harmonic structures on. This was an old one that completed. Okay, we talked about this, came down to the green line, went all the way back up in like 2 days to the breakout zone, right? All the way back up. Again, this is residual, so this one's old, but still paying a little bit of attention to it. Here's a new signal that we got in this thing, and I think it's back to back, which is interesting. Okay, so here's the pink breakout zone. It came down to the halfway, a little bit below it, probably came down to the 5/8 in here, I think. Bounced all the way back up into the breakout zone, came down to the halfway. So longer term, I'm looking at this British pound and I'm saying, like, there's a good chance the energy's built up. This is a monthly chart here. Okay, so again, we just went from a micro time frame to a macro big picture time frame. If this thing can the energy is clearly building here. We see this on all the currencies. So again, this was what makes me think partially this dollar can go higher. If these things are all going to break down, Australian dollar, Canadian dollar, right? Again, we talked about Canada this week with Carney early in the week. You know, he even said it himself, like, we're never going to let ourselves get put in that position again. Well, you have to take away, like, from that, you can't just take that. You have to take another layer deeper and say, what does he mean by that? Like, what is this? We're never going to let this happen to us again. Okay. So what kind of a position is Canada in? Right? Are they going to have to struggle from whatever this is? You know, we're never going to let this happen again. So the point is, if this stuff's going to come apart, the dollar is going to go higher. Remember, dollar's on one side, all the other currencies are on the other. So can this British pound make a run down to that turquoise box? That's kind of what I'm looking at. All right. And the way we're going to look at this is, the way that I'm going to look at this is by looking at this, whatever I did with that structure. Is it this one? Somehow I just lost it. There it is. No, that's not it. Maybe it's, anyway, I lost it. I have to find that again. But that's the current harmonic structure. Again, looking to see if it's going to break below that halfway. Does it get down to the full downside objective? Remember, this is an old residual that proved it had importance. Okay, I can go ahead and flip this over to white, turn that to dashed. And the reason we look at this is not necessarily because people care about the British pound, but we're watching to see what's going to happen with the dollar. These other big things that have connections to what's going on in Europe and Ukraine, with Europe, Ukraine, Russia, it's going to trickle through some of these currencies. We can watch the euro, but it's a piece of junk. The UK is not a bad place to look to see if this stuff's breaking down, right? It's a cleaner currency, right? Remember, they never let their currency get morphed into the euro when they did the Brexit, right? They always kept their currency separate. Somebody there was smart. Whoever did that was smart, okay? Or devious. I'm not sure which one it is, but that's why I'm watching this British pound. Okay, let's take a look at what else did we want to look at? Oh, of course we want to look at gold. It's progressing fairly well. Gold, silver. Okay, we looked at crude. All right, let's go in and look at this. I want to look at. That's right. I can't get to that one on here, can I? I got to go to this. All right. I want to show you this on this chart. See if that'll do it. Okay, that's how we got there. All right, so yesterday we did a bunch of stuff on this, and let me clear some of this stuff off here, and we'll kind of update this. All right. So I should have left that one on there. Okay, here we go. I want to draw this thing out. And the reason I want to do this, even though we're not following that moving average, okay, we got two moving averages on here. We got the purple one and we have the green one. And what we're trying to do is extend these things out. Originally, this thing kind of rolled over, and I thought maybe we would see something, I drew the extension of this, the projection of this out into here. The reason I'm doing that is because of all the things that are hitting the end of October, 1st of November, right? So I'm going to keep that on there, and I'm going to put it right, the convergence of this triangle right in that pink box, okay? I'm going to clear this off there. And what we're looking at is this. What I'm looking for is the, let me just clear this off here too, okay? That way we can get to this. Okay. So we have this massive move in gold, okay? We double top, we get divergence up here, right? Okay. Gold double tops. And we get this big plunge down right back to the moving average. So right now, the trend is still up on this gold. There's no doubt about that, right? Massive move up in gold. We did see about, 10% sell-off. So 4,400 down to 4,000. It's about 10%. Okay, it happened in 1 to 2 days. First day was brutal, right? After that double top, the thing just got crushed. Okay, 4,400. We talked about this with Societe Generale. Okay, curious, right? Had our antenna up, all right? Why'd this guy say 4,400? He was saying that as we were somewhere around in here, I think, right? And then we get the 4,400. We watch it stop. Okay, then it sells off. 200-point sell-off goes right back up to 4,400. Then we get the big plunge. But again, right back to trend, right back to the moving average. So nothing's really broken on this gold. Basically, it went on sale. We got a 10% discount over the last couple of days. Now, what's going to happen next? Odds are high that we had this massive move. This thing needs to digest some of this move, okay? And a lot of big boys dumped. When you see that market come down like that, they had liquidity. It was during the day, okay, during the trading day. So they had as much liquidity as they could get in there, and they hammered it, right? So every bid, everybody who was trying to buy, they just blew through them, right? Think of it like think about it like a cartoon, when Roadrunner gets something dropped on him, and he gets squished to the ground. You know what I mean? Like literally that's what they did. They just dropped the cement ball, right on the Roadrunner, and he just got squished. They came through like a ball of fire, and they were just anybody who had a bid in there who thought they were going to pick a bottom, bam, they just steamrolled you, right? All the way down into the moving average. Now what we're thinking is we're going to get some kind of a converging triangle that leads into the end of this week, leads into the end of this week, first of next week, with all the stuff going on in Asia, with all the things going on with canceling the meeting with Putin, okay, with the debt hitting 38 trillion, if that has anything to do with it. I think it has very little to do with it at this point. Not to say that longer term it doesn't have an influence on it, but I don't think it's what's driving this gold market at all. I think what's driving this gold market is the fact that it's just had this huge run up and it needs to digest this move, okay? And that's what we're looking for, is how is it going to digest it? So maybe a move up into this area. Okay, it's looking pretty strong today. And yesterday we were in here saying like this looks like a pretty good spot down in here, right? Sitting right along this thing. It seems to be working. So can we make a move up in here? If we get up into there, that's a big move. Okay, good chance if it holds there, then there's a good chance it is going to come back down into here. Okay, and we're going to see this triangle. And again, I don't know exactly how the triangle will form. Sometimes it's, gradual moves up and then slam back down again, right? Some news comes out and they just slam it. But here's the key to this whole thing is that you want to watch the narrative and be prepared ahead of time, okay? So when it gets up to this yellow dot, watch what comes out in the news wires. Okay, this will tell you if this is manipulated or not. If we see this thing go up there and then we get something happen, right? We release some data point at 10:57 on a Friday, okay, and we don't retract it, and this market gets slammed off of that. Hopefully this is starting to come through, to our audience that I don't know how this happens, right? But clearly something's being played with here, okay, and. Again, I believe that nature still wins, right? The harmonic structures still win. I believe that the growth and decay patterns, again, the way nature's formed, the way these markets form, because again, we are these markets, right? We are the fear and greed that drive these markets. So we're all connected. We're connected to these markets are connected to us, we're connected to each other. These markets are connected to each other and so forth. It's all connected, right? They all have their own different vibrational pattern, but we're all connected. And so the point is this, can we see this thing rally up in here? And do we get some sort of a news wire that comes out, smacks this thing down? At that point, you have to start scratching your head saying, okay, I think I get what's going on here. I need to use these news wires to my benefit, not what they want me to think, right? They want me to, when we get up to that high, they're going to say gold's recovered. It's made a miraculous recovery, right? If we get up into here. Gold, here's the storyline. Gold has a huge, biggest day up in 2 weeks, or something. They'll come up with some way to do this, biggest up day and, or whatever, right? They're going to come up with some headline and again, get people to come in, right? The crocodile's sitting under the water, little beady eyeballs are up there waiting for the antelope to come in, and then bam, and then they get you, So the key is to not let the news wires drive us. The key is to be out front of them and then see what they mean, okay? That's what I'm trying to do here with the show and with the harmonics, is to say, let's get the harmonics and then let's pay attention to the news and not let the news drive us. Let the harmonics drive us, manage the risk, and then be anticipatory, right? Like what's going to happen next? Do we, are they setting us up for something? Okay, if they're trying to set us up, let them play their little game, right? Just be smarter and then whack them. You know what I mean? Then we whack them. We don't, again, that's hopefully that makes sense, right? That's what we're trying to do here. We'll see, again, so far so good on this converging triangle. Let's see what happens. Let's see if we actually get up to that other line, right? We start to create this triangle. And if we do, then there's a good chance we're going to come back down and we're going to see this thing consolidate going into the Fed meeting next week, going into this Asian conference next week, going into tech earnings next week, going into the government shutdown next week, all these things that are lining up for the end of October, 1st of November. So I think that gets that. I want to cover this thing on the poly market. There's a, I'll just briefly lead into this. There's a, there's this betting thing called the poly market. And I don't know exactly what they're up to with it, but I want to research it because it's being connected to tokenization. All right. And we haven't really covered what is tokenization, and we're still learning what is tokenization. We know what it is. We don't know how they're going to roll it out, but we know it's coming. Okay. Because there's way too much energy and too much of a buzz around this to not see it become part of our daily lives. Okay. We see, BlackRock talking about it for 2 or 3 years now, and we see it amping up. Okay. This tokenization is becoming, a pipe dream or a discussion 2 or 3 years ago to now it's becoming a buzz, right? It's gone from this one point in time where Fink's talking about it to now it's a buzz, right? It's happening all over the place. We see it showing up in this poly market. We see the poly market creating this deal with NHL, right? The National Hockey League. And now the NHL's, I think they're able to now, poly market's now able to put NHL logos on their stuff. So they're up to something here. They're pushing something, okay? We also know that we have this connection to ICE, okay? The poly market is connected to ICE. That's International Continental Exchange, which is the owner of the New York Stock Exchange, which goes back to Sprecher, okay, which he happens to be married to Kelly Loeffler, who's in the administration, who's part of the Small Business Administration. She was also the senator of Georgia when the 2020 election blew up, and she was one of the ones that got caught in the rigged elections. So there's something going on here with the Sprecher and so forth. Not only that, we have Vlad Tenov of Robinhood setting up shop. I forget what country it is. He's setting up shop in some country in Europe, and he's putting in this tokenization. Okay, so there's a story building here, right? And he's using this other country in Europe. I forget the name. I need to do more work on this. But the point is, this tokenization is becoming real. Okay, and we're seeing it show up in these gambling things and the markets and these binary markets and all this stuff. And there needs to be thought put into this because this is coming our way, right? This is like that freight train coming down the road. We need to address it. We can't just let it run us down, right? We have to see what's coming and figure out what this tokenization is and how to position for this stuff, right? And again, this goes back to, this is why Aaron Day, what the work he's doing is so important with Zano and Freedom Dollar and all that kind of stuff, because this is a way to potentially get off the freight train, get off the railroad tracks of this freight train coming right down our face. All right. So with that, it's a lot of stuff. Hopefully that makes sense. What we're watching is all this stuff out of Ukraine, Russia. What's going to go on with President Trump? What's going to go on with the sanctions on Russia? How are they going to implement this? We see, Scott Bessent, who, again, we're always questioning because we have to. I mean, I went off on him a couple days ago, and I think he totally deserved it. Somebody has to do it, and I'm not afraid to do it. The point is, and again, how much travel it gets, I don't know. The point is, it doesn't matter. We still have to do it. And so the key is, what's going to come with these sanctions and what's the fallout in the markets? Okay, today's stock day. What's going to happen with these stocks? We know we're going into big tech earnings next week. Remember, Friday, tomorrow's another Friday. Okay, past 2 Fridays, we've seen big smackdowns in the market. We're watching to see, this thing right here. Is that 65.74? Are those levels that we're talking about in the harmonic structure on the S&P and the NASDAQ and potentially even the Dow, that 0.1, okay, that the number one on that thing. Are we consolidating again for potentially a move from 0.2 to 0.3, all right? I don't know, but that's what we're watching for, because if that starts to happen, then there's a good chance we're going to get a consolidation. When the dust settles on that and they create massive amounts of fear at the bottom of 3, then we're going to get consolidation 3 to 4. And all the dust is going to settle. The crocodile is going to let the water settle in again. The beady little eyes are going to wait for another antelope to come in, and then he's going to strike again, and we're going to go down wave 5. Okay, so what do these things mean? I don't know. Are we going to go much lower, or are we going to go much higher into the end of the year? I don't think we're going to limp into the end of 2025. I'll be highly surprised if we limp into the end of 2025 and just go sideways. I get a funny feeling we're going to see either the whoosh to 50,000 because the Fed cuts 50 basis points and gives a hint that they're going to cut twice, or we're going to see something unravel with South America, Venezuela, Russia, Ukraine, something in Asia, lots of hot spots. Israel seems to be dying down, but again, that thing can heat up at any given time again. And so those are the things we're watching, right? Just don't think we're going to limp into the end of the year. All right. So with that, have a blessed day, everyone. We'll come back, take a look at commodities. Hopefully, I have a little more time to dig into some of this stuff. And I think we still did pretty well today. I didn't have a lot of time to prepare for today, but the news kind of took its own, right? This whole sanction with Russia thing kind of takes on a life of its own, and just have to cover the basics on it. Okay. Have a blessed day, everyone. We'll see you tomorrow. Thanks for joining. And if you have any ideas for tomorrow, if anybody wants to throw a couple tickers in at the end of the thing, we'll take a look at 2 or 3 tomorrow. We'll throw that into the show. And if anybody has some good ideas of things they want to look at. All right. Thank you. Bye-bye.